welcome to the Den of the Grey Waste. I am your host, Grey Waste Tim, and today we are continuing on with our chapter reads. We're hopping back from the Dornish plot back to the Blackfyre plot as we go back to Tyrion. This will be Tyrion II. The title of this is Carrying the Wheel. That is in reference, of course, to David Lightbringer and the "my name is Aegon" joke that we keep bringing up. This is actually, for me, this is going to be a very, very loaded Blackfyre weekend. Hey, Damon. And, of course, joining me is Damon the cat, who, of course, probably will be hearing his name said a lot when we discuss Blackfyres, even though you chose to be a Targaryen, not a Blackfyre, even though Damon Blackfyre is exactly what I had in mind when I adopted him. But yes, we will be reading Tyrion II and A Dance with Dragons today, and then tomorrow I will be rejoining David Lightbringer after a number of weeks away, and we will be doing Wins a Winner predictions regarding the Jon Con Aegon storyline, and that of course means Varys, Illyrio, and the potential sixth Blackfyre rebellion that is brewing. Yes, I will be doing an Illyrio voice as we read. So also for those who don't know, the channel is now monetized. Super chats are enabled. There is also a link to my paypal.me in the video info. If you want to contribute to the channel, again, not necessary, but always appreciate it. Just a tip jar. And in order to, oh, hey, girl. I also got, oh, nope. Never mind, Cassie doesn't want to hop up with us. I won't have both kitties. I've been away doing uncle things. I've got to see my nephew the last 3 weekends in a row. He is 3 months old now, and he is super cute. And he came up today. We took my brother, my sister-in-law, brought the nephew up, and we took our mom out for our Mother's Day brunch. So, yes, very, very fun being an uncle. Merrick is, I love that little guy. And I've been asking my brother, like, when do I get to read the Song of Ice and Fire to him? I'll do it in a nice voice. He won't know what terrible words I'm using. I guess before we go on, so this is, of course, talking about more Aegon, more Blackfyre stuff. So I actually have done more for the "My Name is Aegon" song. So before we read the story, I would like to serenade the audience. My name is Aegon. I'm carrying Blackfyre, and I'm pressing my claim, 'cause Rhaegar is my sire, he's my father. Come march next to me, Golden Company. Illyrio hired them, then he's gonna throw a feast. Halden's teaching fine, little more stitch and twine. Raleigh load the bags, don't forget my candied ginger. The fat man keeps changing his plans. Now I'm to wed Arianne. Sansa's another choice bride, that's right. Got Elia Sand on the side. The sellswords are going home. The sellswords are going home. That's right, Damon. The Golden Company is going home. So we will go straight into the chapter. Thank you for bearing with me with that, but I rewrote some lyrics to "My Name is Jonas" to the "My Name is Aegon" thing, and I needed to get them out. So this is Tyrion II and A Dance with Dragons. Picking up where we last left Tyrion. They are now departing Illyrio's manse. They are leaving Pentos, and we are heading towards the Rhoyne, towards Volantis, to meet up with Aegon and his crew. This is when we get our first introductions that there's some Blackfyre shenanigans still brewing in this story. And Illyrio is the man behind them, along with Varys. They departed Pentos by the Sunrise Gate. though Tyrion Lannister never glimpsed the sunrise. It'll be as if you had never come to Pentos, my little friend, promised Magister Illyrio as he drew shut the litter's purple velvet drapes. No man must see you leave the city, as no man saw you enter. No man except the sailors who stuffed me in that barrel, the cabin boy who cleaned up after me, the girl you sent to warm my bed, and that treacherous freckled washerwoman. Oh, and your guards. Unless you remove their wits along with their balls, they know you're alone in here. The litter was suspended between 8 mammoth draft horses on heavy leather straps. 4 eunuchs paced beside the horses, 2 to either side, and more were trudging along behind to guard the baggage train. And this gives you just a scale of how heavy Illyrio is, right? He's fat. And that is why we need all 8 draft horses just to carry one litter that technically only has 2 people inside, one of which is a dwarf. Yet we need all this power to carry this thing as well as all the luggage that they're carrying along with them. Unsullied tell no tales, Illyrio assured him, and the galley that delivered you is on its way to Asshai even now. It will be 2 years before she returns if the seas are kind. As for my household, they love me well. None would betray me. Cherish that thought, my fat friend. One day we will carve those words upon your crypt. We should be aboard that galley, the dwarf said. The fastest way to Volantis is by sea. The sea is hazardous, replied Illyrio. Autumn is a season rife with storms, and pirates still make their dens upon the stepstones and venture forth to prey on honest men. It would never do for my little friend to fall into such hands. And that is true. We get a glimpse of that if we go back in the Quentin chapter that me and Dave read. They get shanghaied by pirates, and one of them is described in terms that sound a lot like Illyrio. Very fat, has a king's ransom on his worth in rings on his fingers that they have to cut off with a cleaver, which is the exact same thing that Tyrion says about Illyrio and all of his rings, which also just happen to be the same color of the gemstone dynasties of the great empire of the Dawn. Going back. There are pirates on the Rhoyne as well. River pirates. The cheesemonger gave there's some kind of major difference between ocean pirates and river pirates. Look, if your boat gets boarded by men with swords, whether they be the corsairs of the Stepstones or the Boslic Isles, whether they be these river pirates or whether they be Ironborn, it's not going to be a happy, fun time no matter what. The cheesemonger gave a yawn, covering his mouth with the back of his hand. Cockroach captain scurrying after crumbs. One hears talk of stone men as well. They are real enough, poor damn things. But why speak of such things? The day is too fine for such talk. We shall see the Rhoyne soon, and there you shall be rid of Illyrio and his big belly. Till then, let us drink and dream. We have sweet wine and savories to enjoy. Why dwell upon disease and death? And you can see, here, Illyrio is buttering him up while still at the same time being like, yeah, stone men, they're a thing, but let's not focus on that. Oh, yes, and some of you in the chat may notice last time there were those saying that I need mods. If you have some of you, the ones who I know come around here the most often, you may see that you now have the wrench by your name. Wield it well. I am trusting you to keep out the riffraff and to not abuse your new modding powers. Yep, some people got the hammer. People I feel like I can trust, and maybe we'll get more. So, why indeed? Tyrion heard the thrum of a crossbow once again and wondered. The litter swayed side to side, a soothing movement that made him feel as if he were a child being rocked to sleep in his mother's arms. Not that I would know what that was like. Silk pillows stuffed with goose down cushioned his cheeks. The purple velvet walls curved overhead to form a roof, making it pleasantly warm within despite the autumn chill outside. So we can see, like here, even in winter's coming to Essos as well. Now we are in Pentos, which we're leaving Pentos, which is more on a bit more of a northern latitude, not as far north as Braavos and Lorath, but not as far south as Lys, Myr, Tyrosh, and Volantis. So the chill is there, and that does give us the impression that Essos is in time for some bad things, just in the way that Westeros is, whether that be others or just Dany when she finally decides to leave Slaver's Bay, whatever kind of mark she's going to leave as she makes her way west to Westeros. But the chill in the air, it definitely is a harbinger of bad things to come. A train of mules trailed behind them, carrying chests and casks and barrels. Oh, so, okay, so the draft horses aren't even the ones that are actually carrying the luggage. There's a second line of mules, and they're the ones carrying the chests and casks. So yeah, like George is really playing up the fact that Illyrio is just this damn heavy that we need all these draft horses just to carry his fat ass. All right. Trailed behind them, carrying chests and casks and barrels and hampers of delectables to keep the Lord of Cheese from growing peckish. They nibbled on spice sausage that morning, washed down with a dark smokeberry brown. Jellied eels and Dornish reds filled their afternoon. Come evening, there were sliced hams, boiled eggs, and roasted larks stuffed with garlic and onions, with pale ales and Myrish fire wines to help in their digestion. The litter was as slow as it was comfortable, however, and the dwarf soon found himself itching with impatience. How many days until we reach the river? He asked Illyrio that evening. At this pace, your queen's dragons will be larger than Aegon's 3 before I can lay eyes upon them. Would it were so! A large dragon is more fearsome than a small one. The Magister shrugged. Much as it would please me to welcome Quinn Volantis, I must rely on you and Griff for that. I can serve her best in Pentos, smoothing the way for her return. So long as I am with you, though. Well, an old fat man must have his comforts, yes? Come, drink a cup of wine. Tell me, Tyrion said as he drank, why should a Magister of Pentos give 3 figs who wears the crown in Westeros? Where is the gain for you in this venture, my lord? The fat man dabbed grease from his lips. I am an old man, grown weary of this world and its treacheries. Is it so strange that I should wish to do some good before my days are done, to help a sweet young girl regain her birthright? Next, you'll be offering me a suit of magic armor and a palace in Valyria. So, yeah, so the suit of magic armor is great because that's like it's a good thing for Euron and what he's going to eventually get. And then, of course, it also is every time that George says the fat man, and the fat man is an old man grown weary, he is, in a way, he also is poking fun at himself. The fat man keeps changing his plans. The line we get about Illyrio from members of the Goldie Company is, of course, George poking fun at himself and admitting, like, yeah, the story's kind of gotten away from me, and that's why Winter is taking so long. So just a bit of self-deprecating humor with Illyrio being a sort of George stand-in within his own story. So, fear not, my little, if Daenerys is no more than a sweet young girl, the Iron Throne will cut her into sweet young pieces. Fear not, my little friend, the blood of Aegon the Dragon flows in her veins, along with the blood of Aegon the Unworthy, Maegor the Cruel, and Baelor the Befuddled. Tell me more of her. And the fact that Aegon the Unworthy is the first of the bad kings that Tyrion has come to mind in this inner thoughts of his should be another red flag popping up, telling us more about Blackfyres, because it's through the loins of Aegon the Unworthy that the Blackfyres are going to come, and all these rebellions are going to grow from that man's seed. The fat man grew pensive. Daenerys was half a child when she came to me, yet fairer even than my second wife. So lovely, I was tempted to claim her for myself. Such a fearful, furtive thing, however. I knew I should get no joy from coupling with her. Instead, I summoned a bed warmer and fucked her vigorously until the madness passed. If truth be told, I did not think Daenerys would survive for long amongst the horse lords. That did not stop you selling her to Khal Drogo. Dothraki neither buy nor sell. Say rather that her brother Viserys gave her to Drogo to win the Khal's friendship. A vain young man, and greedy. Viserys lusted for his father's throne, but he lusted for Daenerys too, and was loath to give her up. The night before the princess wed, he tried to steal into her bed, insisting that if he could not have her hand, he would claim her maidenhead. Had I not taken the precaution of posting guards upon her door, Viserys might have undone years of planning. And yeah, so here we get to see more of just this entitlement of Viserys, that he's entitled to the throne because of who his dad was. He's entitled to Daenerys, that if Daenerys is going to be wed to Khal Drogo, that he's at least going to claim her maidenhead, take her virginity before it happens, somehow as a means of just asserting more authority and dominance over her. And yeah, so we get to see and you know, of course there is the ew squick factor. It's Targaryens, incest isn't out of the norm, but still for Viserys to have this view of his sister as his property in such a way. And also that, just as he said, would undo years of planning. Like Viserys would be throwing a wrench into his own plans, because for him to take the throne, he's relying on Khal Drogo. He's relying on Dothraki hordes crossing the narrow sea, something they've never done before. And yet he's so entitled to the idea of his sister and taking her virginity that he would completely screw up his own plans just to have that done. So it really goes to show he would have been a terrible king. It kind of makes you wonder what Doran Martell is thinking. Doran Martell being such a calculating man, how much he really knew about Viserys's character to be making the plans that he is making of offering Arianne up as a bride. Is he looking just so much at Arianne to be queen that he'd be willing to throw her to such a terrible husband, like to marry her off to Joffrey just to make her queen? You really don't know. But that's like one of the big when it comes to Doran Martell's whole stake in this whole Targaryen thing. It is like, how much did you really know about Viserys before you went crafting this little scheme of yours? Because Illyrio knows Viserys, and he knows he was not going to hitch his wagon to that horse. Viserys for him was just a means to an end. And we'll definitely get more into that as the chapter rolls on. It is bad, but yeah. So Viserys might have undone years ago. He sounds an utter fool. Oh, bring back up the story so we can read along. He sounds an utter fool. Viserys was Mad Aerys' son. Just so. Daenerys is quite different. He popped a roasted lark into his mouth and crunched it noisily, bones and all. Oh yeah, and so going back to the last chapter, there was a lot of squisher imagery that was going on too. with Illyrio, and which is par for the course for Illyrio and Varys. Varys is a merman, and the whole and this like Merlin King thing going on, and then here we get more of that with Illyrio here, that he's he's eating things bones and all. It's like the way he eats is just monstrous and otherworldly. Like he can just swallow things whole. Again, George really playing up just how big and fat this man is. But there definitely is more hidden monstrous themes in there, and that of course is also the whole front that he's putting on. As Tyrion is well aware, like this is like I'm an old man grown weary of the world. I just wish to do some good before my big dirt nap. And Tyrion can already, Tyrion can say like, yeah, you're full of shit. What are you really getting out of this? And that is the thing that we're going to try and uncover today and tomorrow with Dave. Like, what is it that you are truly building up to, Illyrio? What are you and Varys working on? And just how much are you, and how are you dragging Jon Con along the way? The frightened child who sheltered in my manse died on the Dothraki sea and was reborn in blood and fire. This dragon queen who wears her name as a true Targaryen. When I sent ships to bring her home, she turned towards Slaver's Bay. In a short span of days, she conquered Astapor, made Yunkai bend the knee, and sacked Meereen. Mantaris will be next if she marches west along the old Valyrian roads. If she comes by sea, well, her fleet must take on food and water at Volantis. By land or by sea, there are long leagues between Meereen and Volantis, Tyrion observed. 550 as the dragon flies, through deserts, mountains, swamps, and demon-haunted ruins. Many and more will perish, but those who survive will be stronger by the time they reach Volantis, where they shall find you and Griff awaiting them, with fresh forces and sufficient ships to carry them all across the sea to Westeros. Bitch, you thought. That was the plan. The original plan, meet up with Daenerys and Volantis. It seems like a good halfway point. And that is where young Griff and his father figure, old Griff, should be waiting to bind the two together. And Fagon will offer himself up as a husband. And then we can bind together the two claims of House Targaryen, the long-lost son of Rhaegar and the younger sister of Rhaegar. But really, most likely, if we read between the lines, it's more seems to be a way of binding together the Targaryen and Blackfyre lines if Fagon is actually a Blackfyre. This seems like a way of binding the rift between the Targaryen house and the cadet branch that is Blackfyre, bringing them together, marrying them in, and then having them jointly rule. Tyrion pondered all he knew of Volantis, oldest and proudest of the 9 free cities. Something was awry here. Even with half a nose, he could smell it. It's said there are 5 slaves for every free man in Volantis. Why would the Triarchs assist a queen who smashed the slave trade? He pointed at Illyrio. For that matter, why would you? Slavery may be forbidden by the laws of Pentos, yet you have a finger in that trade as well, and maybe a whole hand. And yet you conspire for the Dragon Queen and not against her? Why? What do you hope to gain from Queen Daenerys? Are we back to that again? You are a persistent little man. Illyrio gave a laugh and slapped his belly. As you will. The beggar king swore that I should be his master of coin, and a lordly lord as well. Once he wore his golden crown, I should have my choice of castles, even Casterly Rock if I desired. So, we are getting a bit of connections here. For those who don't know, before I started streaming, I was writing essays, and I wrote this one called Aegon, A Parallel of Kings, Princes, and Pretenders, where I did my best to connect Aegon to as many Targaryens as possible, but also to the Blackfyre pretenders that we know of, and as well to some of the pretender princes, like Trystane Truefire and Gaiman Palehair, or the pretender kings. And one connection I made was to Jaehaerys the Conciliator, and that it was through Jaehaerys the Conciliator's Master of Coin, who was a man named Rhaego Draws. He was known as the Lord of Air. Rhaego Draws was a Pentoshi who came from nothing, but raised himself to be the richest man in Pentos, but he was snubbed by the Pentoshi aristocracy. So instead, he looked at Westeros and saw a way of making a calling there by becoming the Master of Coin for Jaehaerys. Now, Illyrio, for his part, Illyrio starts off as a Bravo, a sellsword. But he eventually becomes the richest man in Pentos. Like Illyrio, of the merchant princes, Illyrio is the richest man, even more than the Prince of Pentos, which is a puppet figure, and the other magisters. Illyrio is really like one of the guys really running the show in Pentos. But after his first wife passes, his first wife was a cousin to the Prince of Pentos. He then finds a bed slave in Lys by the name of Sarah, and he takes her to bride, and he falls in love with her, marries her, and after that, he is snubbed by the Pentoshi aristocracy. It is said that the gates to the palace of the Prince of Pentos were closed for him forever after that. So, in the same way, like Illyrio is mirroring Rhaego Draws in this, and Rhaego Draws, again, being a Master of Coin. So, Illyrio being offered this role of Master of Coin by Viserys is a Jaehaerys connection, and it stands to reason that in Aegon's court, should Aegon take the throne, the offer will probably still be there. That's probably still going to be a office position that Illyrio can take on Aegon's small council. So it would propel Illyrio, who's already a very powerful man in Pentos, in Essos, to a very powerful position in Westeros as well. So yeah, that don't let that Master of Coin line just slip by. Like that's a whole big thing being built right there. I also got, so let me check my notifications. No, okay, that wasn't. Just checking to make sure that wasn't a PayPal or anything that came in. Okay, so going back, Tyrion snorted wine back up and Tyrion snorted wine back up the scarred stump that had been his nose. My father would have loved to hear that. Your Lord Father has no cause for concern. Why would I want a rock? Oh my God, a giant rock. My manse is large enough for any man, and more comfortable than your drafty Westerosi castles. Master of Coin, though. The fat man peeled another egg. I am fond of coins. Is there any sound as sweet as the clink of gold on gold? A sister screams. Are you quite certain that Daenerys will make good her brother's promises? She will, or she will not. Illyrio bit the egg in half. I told you, my little friend, not all that a man does is done for gain. Believe as you wish, but even fat old fools like me have friends and debts of affection to repay. Liar, thought Tyrion. There is something in this venture worth more to you than coin or castles. You meet so few men who value friendship over gold these days. Too true, the fat man said, deaf to the irony. How is it that the spider became so dear to you? We were young together, two green boys in Pentos. Varys came from Myr. So he did. I met him not long after he arrived, one step ahead of the slavers. By day he slept in the sewers. By night he prowled the rooftops like a cat. I was near as poor, a bravo in soiled silks living by my blade. Perhaps you chanced to glimpse the statue by my pool. Pytho Melanon carved that when I was 6 and 10. A lovely thing, though now I weep to see it. Age makes ruins of us all. I am still in mourning for my nose, but Varys. All right, so he's saying Varys came from Myr, and that is true, technically speaking. Varys was part of a mummers troop in Myr, but Varys is originally from Lys, born in Lys, and it is after joining the mummers troop that he begins his travels around the Free Cities, as well as the occasional stops over in Westeros. But we can say that Varys comes from Myr in the fact that Varys was castrated in Myr when he was bought by the sorcerer, who then gave him the potion that paralyzed him, cut off his man parts, threw them into the brazier, and Varys claims to hear a demonic voice. And that is what stands out to Varys, more so than what was done to him, more so than the pain of everything that went on. It is hearing a voice from the other side after his parts are thrown in and the flames turn blue. So yeah, Varys is born in Lys, but symbolically he made in Myr. So that's where the Myr man imagery really comes in for Varys. Varys as a symbolic squisher. And then you couple that with Illyrio, who is a Pentoshi, but the Pentoshi are, as part of the Valyrian cities, the Pentoshi, though, they're not as hung up on the whole purity bloodlines the way that Volantis and Lys are. Pentos is actually a lot more mixed because it's more of a seafaring culture where that's where a lot of what made Pentos a great city was the trade made from seafaring. And so there was a lot more intermingling, which is a reference then to, if we take that to the Lovecraft element of things, of Innsmouth, Lovecraft being the hardcore racist that he was, Shadow over Innsmouth, the horror for that for Lovecraft in his warped mind was the idea of miscegenation, of race mixing and all of that. And Pentos, as far as for the Valyrian cities, is one of the free cities that does the most race mixing, which is why Illyrio and and Pentoshi as a whole can also run the gambit as symbolic squishers through Lovecraft's fear of miscegenation. I think I'm pronouncing that wrong, but yeah, that is the whole point. Even though the squisher, it's just using race mixing as a parallel for monsters. That is what Lovecraft is doing. George is not doing that, but he is using those Lovecraft building blocks. But to really talk about the story means to also have to shine light on the more unsavory aspects of Lovecraft and admit that while the Innsmouth stuff did, and the ideas of cosmic horror and all these things that we consider Lovecraftian horror also are built upon these foundations of some very, very, very racist thinking. So in Myr, he was a prince of thieves, until a rival thief informed on him. In Pentos, his accent marked him, and once he was known for a eunuch, he was despised and beaten. Why he chose me to protect him, I may never know, but we came to an arrangement. Varys spied on lesser thieves and took their takings. I offered my help to their victims, promising to recover the valuables for a fee. Soon every man who had suffered a loss knew to come to me, while city's footpads and cut purses sought out Varys. Half to slit his throat, the other half to sell him what they'd stolen. We both grew rich, and richer still, when Varys trained his mice. So Varys and Illyrio basically create a crime syndicate. And that is how they come to be wealthy. And yet despite Varys's wealth and despite the fine silks that he wears when he presents himself, the lavender perfumes, when we go to Varys's room, though, it's very, very simple, and he sleeps on a stone bed. So Varys, for as far as he has come in life and in stature and his role as Master Whispers, he also still has these ties back to when he was a poor street urchin living on the streets, and that is reflected in his room, and those few times where we get to kind of peel the mask away and see the real Varys when he's not putting on an act. The only time we ever get to really see that through Varys himself is the epilogue of Dance with Dragons, the very last chapter, when he starts doing his bad guy evil monologue to Kevin Lannister as he lays dying. And that seems to be like Varys just being like, look, I've held this all together. I've held this inside for so many years. I have to tell somebody, and fuck, you ain't gonna tell anyone, so I might as well tell you. And that's when we get the bad guy evil monologue about what his plans are. So, in King's Landing, he kept little birds. Mice, we called them then. The older thieves were fools who thought no further than turning a night's plunder into wine. Varys preferred orphan boys and young girls. He chose the smallest, the ones who were quick and quiet, and taught them to climb walls and slip down chimneys. And part of me thinks that, aside from the tongue cutting, this could be George referencing Oliver Twist, those street urchins, as Varys grows up and becomes sort of this leading role to the small kids that he is now bringing in as his little crime cronies. He taught them to read as well. We left the gold and gems for common thieves. Instead, our mice stole letters, ledgers, charts. Later, they would read them and leave them where they lay. Secrets are worth more than silver or sapphires, Varys claimed. Just so. I grew so respectable that a cousin of the Prince of Pentos let me wed his maiden daughter, whilst whispers of a certain eunuch's talents crossed the narrow sea and reached the ears of a certain king, a very anxious king, who did not wholly trust his son, nor his wife, nor his hand, a friend of his youth, who had grown arrogant and overproud. I do believe that you know the rest of this tale. Is that not so? Much of it, Tyrion admitted. I see that you are somewhat more than a cheesemonger after all. Illyrio inclined his head. You are kind to say so, my little friend, and for my part, I see that you are just as quick as Lord Varys claimed. He smiled, showing all his crooked yellow teeth, and shouted for another jar of Mirish fire wine. So yeah, the crooked yellow teeth, again, gives you more squisher imagery. And also, like, the cheese man thing, if his teeth are stained yellow, like, it's really holding up more of this cheesemonger stuff that Tywin Lannister would call these guys. When the Magister drifted off to sleep with the fine wine jar at his elbow, Tyrion crept across the pillows to work it loose from its fleshy prison and pour himself a cup. He drained it down and yawned and filled it once again. If I drink enough fire wine, he told himself, perhaps I'll dream of dragons. Okay, so a big part of why we are doing the Blackfyre stuff too is, of course, the confirmation that we are getting our Dunk and Egg show. Casting is done, filming has begun. Hopefully we'll be getting this in alternating years, where we'll get a year where we'll get our new season of House of the Dragon, and then in the off year, Dunk and Egg, and then House of the Dragon, and that will keep our bellies full with a Song of Ice and Fire content, right? But this line of, if I drink enough wine, maybe I'll dream of dragons. And that is the polar opposite of Daeron the Drunkard, a character that we will get in the Dunk and Egg novels that we should see in the Dunk and Egg show. He has dragon dreams, but he drinks specifically so that he will have dreamless sleep, because he does not want to have these dragon dreams and the horrible things that he is seeing. That is why he is Daeron the drunkard. He drinks himself into a stupor to not dream. So yeah, that's just another link back to this to these past Targaryens and Blackfyre shenanigans going on. Is the dragon, and of course there is Daemon Blackfyre II, Daemon Jr., who we get in the Mystery Knight, who also has dragon dreams, which is a way of showing that even the Blackfyres being Targaryen, if not in name, but still in blood, the dragon dreams can carry on over to them as well. And it's if you read the leaked pages of George's working draft for A Feast for Crows, before he decided to do the book split, back when before Feast and Dance became 2 books, when Feast was originally supposed to just be 1 and was supposed to have Jon and Tyrion and Dany chapters alongside all the others. There is a scrapped Tyrion chapter where he has a history lesson after he joins Fagon's crew. It's Tyrion sitting in on a history lesson with Fagon and Halden Halfhand, and they're talking about Meleys the Monstrous. And in those pages, it's implied that Meleys was also having dragon dreams himself, and that he sacrifices his son in order to hatch dragon eggs. Now, George scrapped that, but he does. But just as we know, like George is a Gardner writer, he never really throws things away. He just sort of recycles them and puts them in other places. So we never get this Tyrion chapter in Feast when the book becomes so bloated. But the story of sacrifice to hatch dragon eggs will come up in the tragedy of Summerhall, and the story of, or the mystery of, what exactly was Aegon V doing at Summerhall to hatch dragons. And yes, eventually, along with these chapter reads, I also do want to do a stream where I just straight up read those 6 scrapped pages. Again, it will be a very short stream, but those 6 pages are filled with all kinds of information. It almost gives it, and you kind of get, if you read them, you see why George might have decided against using them, because they kind of give away the game as far as Fagon's secret Blackfyre things go. It's for the same reason that George in this chapter, originally when George first read this chapter aloud before Dance was published, it's actually not there. When the baggage train meets up with Halden Halfhand, they say words in High Valyrian, one of which is sword. George scrapped that, and when Dance was released, that line is taken out. Instead, we get the candied gingered, because he felt that just that one word, sword, in High Valyrian gave away way too much. So, go back to the story. When he was still a lonely child in the depths of Casterly Rock, he oft-rode dragons through the night, pretending he was some lost Targaryen princeling or Valyrian dragon lord soaring high o'er fields and mountains. Okay, and then that line right there becomes the fodder for the Tyrion Targaryen tinfoil theories. Excuse me. Which, admittedly, I'm not a fan of. I think that Tyrion is Tywin's son, because that is, for Tywin, that would be such an insult that, no, he is definitely your kid, and he is the one that is most like you. But there is the Chimera theory, and that comes through with Tyrion having mismatched eyes, that heterochromia, or the mismatched eye color, that maybe Tyrion is... I can't really, I'm bad with the genetic aspect of, but the idea of an egg somehow being fertilized by 2 sperm donors, that if Aerys the Mad King did take advantage of Joanna Lannister, that possibly he could be partially fathering Tyrion, but not the full-on father. It is a weird thing that can happen. I don't know how, like, it seems a lot more really, like, it's a lot of very specific biology to be inserting in a fantasy story, but George is definitely a sci-fi fan, and with all and there are elements of, just as, even though this is a fantasy swords and sorcery story, we harp on and on about all the Lovecraftian horror, and there definitely is a good mix of sci-fi in this story. George is a big fan of Alien. You can check out David Lightbringer's Dracomorph theory, which is going back to George's Alien fandom, is kind of based on xenomorph theory, or not even theory, how xenomorphs reproduce. That's why we get the term Dracomorph. And things like the Pearl Palanquin of the Great Empire of the Dawn. Well, if you read that in a certain light, the God on Earth ascending to the stars in a Pearl Palanquin, that sounds a lot like a UFO taking off. So that there's like it's like George threw in some ancient alien stuff in the Great Empire of the Dawn story. So the sci-fi stuff definitely rears its head. So Tyrion Targaryen, I'm not a fan of, but Tyrion Chimera, I'm not ready to completely dismiss it, but I definitely think Tyrion needed to at least partially be fathered by Tywin, just as an insult to Tywin's pride, that Tyrion is his son and he's like the most Lannister of Lannister. So going back. So Tyrion pretending, dreaming in his dreams that he was a lost Targaryen, that he was a dragon lord. Yeah, Tyrion, make of that what you will. If you're a fan of the Tyrion Targaryen theory, I'm just gonna say, like, I don't agree with you, but I see where you're coming from. Once, when his uncles asked him what gift he wanted for his name day, he begged them for a dragon. It wouldn't need to be a big one. It could be little, like I am. His uncle Jirian thought that was the funniest thing he had ever heard, but his uncle Tyget said, "The last dragon died a century ago, lad." That had seemed so monstrously unfair that the boy had cried himself to sleep that night. Yet if the Lord of Cheese could be believed, the Mad King's daughter had hatched 3 living dragons, 2 more than even a Targaryen should require. Tyrion was almost sorry that he had killed his father. He would have enjoyed seeing Lord Tywin's face when he learned that there was a Targaryen queen on her way to Westeros with 3 dragons, backed by a scheming eunuch and a cheesemonger half the size of Casterly Rock. And I do apologize, I haven't really been paying much attention to chat, but I did not. Okay, I haven't missed any super chats, so at least I'm not neglecting my duties there. So the dwarf was so stuffed that he had to undo his belt and the topmost laces on his breeches. The boy's clothes his host had dressed him in made him feel like 10 pounds of sausage in a 5-pound skin. If we eat this way every day, I will be the size of Illyrio before I meet this dragon queen. Outside, the litter night had fallen. Inside, all was dark. Tyrion listened to Illyrio's snores, the creak of the leather straps, the slow clop-clop of the team's iron-shod hooves on the hard Valyrian road. But his heart was listening for the beat of leathern wings. And yeah, so that line too here, Tyrion is wearing children's clothes. And again, that brings up the question of, why does Illyrio have children's clothes in his manse when there's no little kid running around? Unless there was a little kid living there at some point. And that is what gives us, again, Just as that line about Tyrion being dreaming of being a dragon lord is fodder for the Tyrion Targaryen theorists, the clothing at Illyrio's manse is fodder for people like me who believe that Aegon is not only a Blackfyre, but is also Illyrio's son, because why else is he having children's clothes at his manse if there's no children there? There are no children in Ashai, and there's no children in Illyrio's manse, apparently, but we got clothing for them. Like, no, something needs to add up there. So, next page. When he woke, dawn had come. Oh, yep. So, asleep, symbolically being a long night, and waking, the dawn had come. So, George sprinkling it in there. If we ever get a dream spring, eventually the long night will have to end, and we will get the dawn. It's always darkest before the dawn. The horses plodded on, the litter creaking and swaying between them. Tyrion pulled the curtain back an inch to peer outside, but there was little to see but ochre fields, bare brown elms, and the road itself, a broad stone highway that ran straight as a spear to the horizon. He had read about Valyrian roads, but this was the first he had seen. The freehold's grasp had reached as far as Dragonstone, but never to the mainland of Westeros itself. Odd that Dragonstone is no more than a rock. The wealth was farther west, but they had dragons. Surely they knew that it was there. And this is where we have to then think of, like, well, Tyrion, it's possible that dragons did go further west. When we think about things like the base of the High Tower and the fused black stone that is made of. And we get stories of wild dragons in Westeros even before the coming of the Targaryens. In House of the Dragon, when we meet Cannibal, one of the rumors about Cannibal is that he's so old that even he predates the coming of the Targaryens, when before Daenerys the Dreamer has her visions and her and her family flee the Freehold. It said that the cannibal had already been there. So depending on what story, it depends on what stories you believe. Did dragons come with the Targaryens, or were there free roaming dragons beforehand? And if that is the case, where did they come from? Are dragons actually native to Westeros, or did they come from somewhere else? And that is where we get more of this ancient mariner, ancient Far East Dragon Lord theory of Dragon Lords coming from the great empire of the Dawn, crossing the Sunset Sea, sailing east from Essos until eventually they reach Westeros. Again, Old Town is on the western half of Westeros, whereas Dragonstone is on the eastern half. So if someone were coming from the other side, from the Sunset Sea, Old Town would be one of the first parts of Westeros that they would reach. So he had drunk too much last night. His head was pounding, and even the gentle swaying of the litter was enough to make his gorge rise in his throat. Though he said no word of complaint, his distress must have been plain to Illyrio Mopatis. "Come, drink with me," the fat man said. "A scale from the dragon that burned you, as they say." Oh, it's so that's like some hair of the dog. Like, oh, you hungover? Well, you know what's going to fix that? More alcohol. He poured for them from a flagon of blackberry wine, so sweet that it drew more flies than honey. So, right there. For those who remember me and Dave doing the Dunk and Egg readings, a big part of the Sworn Sword, which is the second Dunk and Egg tale, when they take up service with Eustace Osgrey, who was a Blackfyre supporter, he had blackberry bushes on his land, which they would use to make blackberry wine. So the blackberries are another Blackfyre symbol. And here, the scale from the dragon, as he says, hair of the dog, the follow-up to all of the drinking they did before on these fire wines is to now drink this blackberry wine. Blackberry wine, fire wine, Blackfyre wine. It drew more flies than honey. Tyrion shooed them off with the back of his hand and drank deep. The taste was so cloying that it was all he could do to keep it down. The second cup went down easier, however. Even so, he had no appetite, and when Illyrio offered him a bowl of blackberries and cream, he waved it off. And also, that is more shade of the evening imagery too. So the first cup went down rough, but the second cup was easier. Well, shade of the evening, the first sip is terrible. It's rancid. It tastes like rotten meat. But the second sip becomes more palatable and sweeter. The same happens with weirwood paste. The first taste isn't great, but the second taste becomes easier. And I already made in the last chapter we did, the first Tyrion chapter of Dance, when Tyrion finds that strong purple wine in Illyrio's wine cellar after passing by the wine from the Shadowlands. That also was a shade of the evening connection, as well as I had made the connection of probably like an absinthe reference. But here we are, the blackberry wine, which is a Blackfyre symbol, is also standing in for shade of the evening. First cup goes down bad, but second cup is a lot smoother. So yeah, and that's another way of, just with the strong wine being a symbolic way of Tyrion having some kind of shade of the evening, weirwood paste type of drink. So to here, the blackberry wine is serving that exact same purpose. It's the idea of Tyrion opening his third eye, but Tyrion's third eye is a bullshit detector. Okay, so the second cup went down easier, however. Even so, he had no appetite, and when Illyrio offered him a bowl of blackberries and cream, he waved it off. I dreamt about the queen, he said. I was on my knees before her, swearing my allegiance. But she mistook me for my brother, Jaime, and fed me to her dragons. Let us hope this dream was not prophetic. Tyrion Dragon Dreams. You are a clever imp, just as Varys said, and Daenerys will have need of clever men about her. Sir Barristan is a valiant knight and true, but none, I think, has ever called him cunning. Knights know only one way to solve a problem. They couch their lances and charge. A dwarf has a different way of looking at the world. What of you, though? You are a clever man yourself. Clever girl. But yeah, so, and that is the thing, like, so when we think of Barry and what he's doing by the end of the story, Barry leading the coup in Meereen, and Barry says himself, like, I'm a soldier, not a leader. He's doing his best with the Meereenese situation, but yeah, Barristan's not cunning. He's meant to lead his boys in the battle, but he's really not meant to be a ruler. He's not. He would not be a good hand of the queen for Dany. He does not fit that role. So it is possible that Barry, in his short time as acting head of Meereen, while Dany is gone, while Hisdar is imprisoned, things might go tits up really, really quick because he is very outside of his element right now. You flatter me. Illyrio waggled his hand. Alas, I am not made for travel, so I will send you to Daenerys in my stead. You did her grace a great service when you slew your father, and it is my hope that you will do her many more. Daenerys is not the fool her brother was. She will make good use of you. As kindling, Tyrion thought, smiling pleasantly. They and yeah, so Tyrion's having that thought, but smiling, and there's that expression of smiles in the front, daggers in the back, and that's this constant back and forth with Tyrion and Illyrio, and it's always been a thing for Tyrion and almost every person he's ever had to have a conversation with when he's gauging like, what are you getting out of this? They changed out teams only thrice that day, but seemed to halt twice an hour at the least, so Illyrio could climb down from the litter and have himself a piss. Our Lord of Cheese is the size of an elephant, but he has a bladder like a peanut, the dwarf mused. And in a real-world situation, giving Illyrio's weight and the things he is eating, the constant pissing could be diabetes. But that's just looking at this in a modern medical sense. Don't know if that's what George is aiming for, but definitely something to consider. Doran's gout and Illyrio possibly having diabetes. For the point of those are just to show like these are rich man for the time and place. These are rich man diseases. They aren't as more common things they are with the obesity epidemics that we have in first world countries in the present day. During one stop, he used the time to have a closer look at the road. Tyrion knew what he would find, not packed earth, nor bricks, nor cobbles, but a ribbon of fused stone raised half foot above the ground to allow rainfall and snowmelt to run off its shoulders. Unlike the muddy tracks that passed for roads in the Seven Kingdoms, the Valyrian roads were wide enough for 3 wagons to pass abreast, and neither time nor traffic marred them. They still endured, unchanging, 4 centuries after Valyria itself had met its doom. He looked for ruts and cracks, but found only a pile of warm dung deposited by one of the horses. And yeah, like the Valyrian roads are definitely standing for old world style roads, like the Roman roads and all these other just wonders of a past that we have lost the secrets to on how to build. For road, like you think like these roads last centuries, and then you think of modern roads. Like I live in Pennsylvania, where our state flower is the orange cone that you see on streets. The state is constantly under construction, always doing road work. And it's like, what happened? What happened here? We used to have these roads that could last for centuries, and now they can't even last a year or two without getting gigantic potholes in them. And yeah, like Tyrion bringing up, like the roads of Westeros are more like mud and dirt roads. Maybe you have some paved, like the King's Road, which is one of the Jaehaerys the Conciliator's big construction projects, but it isn't dragon fused stone, and that's because the dragons that the Targaryens have were bred for war. It's not like the Freehold, which probably had different dragons for different purposes. Dave has joked a lot about the construction crew dragon, like, but it is real. Like, if you have a dragon that's meant to build the roads, then you need a more a more docile, lazier dragon that's easier to command. That's just pointing and directing flames for a purpose. You have just as horses are bred for different purposes, dogs bred for different purposes, there is a legacy that was lost in Valyria of dragon breeding. And the Targaryens are war dragons. That is they're conquerors. That is why we always get this idea of, like, with Dany, like, dragons don't garden. It's like, well, no. Some dragons did. If they didn't, then you wouldn't have had the Valyrian Freehold wouldn't have had a functioning society as dragon lords if all dragons were meant for war and battle and fire and destruction and nothing else. Some dragons had to build, and the proof is in these Valyrian roads. So the dung, the dung made him think of his Lord Father. Oh yeah, that pile of shit reminds me of Dad. Are you down in some hell, Father? A nice cold hell where you can look up and see me help restore Mad Aerys's daughter to the Iron Throne. Because when Tyrion kills Tywin, his bowels finally loosen. Tywin Lannister did not shit gold. And then in the chapters that David had been reading when he was doing the Cersei and Jaime chapters, we get a real sense of the rot that was going on with the horrible stench that is coming off of Tywin's corpse. So here we have, again, we're making reference back to that. He sees a pile of horse shit in the road and thinks of his dad. As they resumed their journey, Illyrio produced a bag of roasted chestnuts and began to speak once more of the Dragon Queen. Our last news of Queen Daenerys is old and stale, I fear. By now she will have left Meereen, we must assume. She has her host at last, a ragged host of sellswords, Dothraki horse lords, and unsullied infantry, and she will no doubt lead them west to take back her father's throne. Magister Illyrio twisted open a pot of garlic snails, sniffed at them, and smiled. At Volantis, you will have fresh tidings of Daenerys, we must hope, he said as he sucked one from its shell. So, yeah, sucking a snail from its shell, it's just more squisher imagery here with the way the Valyrio eats. Just slurping a mollusk right out of it. You can picture some kind of sea creature doing that. And this is also, let's bring it back to me. This is also more, though, like showing, like, Varys, this is what Illyrio is assuming happened, because him and Varys, as well as people like Doran Martell, playing their 4D Savas game, they're looking at Daenerys as a piece on the board and thinking of, like, this is the move that she's going to make. But the problem that these guys have, Peter Baelish too, is that, you know, this can only work so far because your pieces have free will. Dany has not left Meereen at this point in time, and it won't be until the end of the book that she leaves Meereen, and that is because of her getting on the back of Drogon, and she's just going where Drogon goes at that point. So, yeah. So, Illyrio's making these assumptions, and it's just going to show, like, no, man, the things you don't, like, the things you think you know, and the things that are really going on are miles and miles apart. She is nowhere even near Volantis at the moment. She is not heading west yet. Meereen is its own is its own carnival at the moment. Yep. He said as he sucked one from a shell. Dragons and young girls are both capricious, and it may be that you will need to adjust your plans. No, Illyrio, you're the one who needs to adjust your plans. Grift will know what to do. Will you have a snail? The garlic is from my own gardens. And that brings up the point too. You know what else was also from Illyrio's own gardens? Those poison mushrooms from the last chapter. So, we can get a sense of safety in the fact that Illyrio was the first to sample the snails, unlike the mushroom scene at the dinner that they had. But still, it's like, you know, good. Not everything from your garden is good, Illyrio. I could ride a snail and make better paste than this litter of yours. Tyrion waved the dish away. You place a deal of trust in this man, Griff, another friend of your childhood. And yeah, we shouldn't take snails lightly. Shouldn't take snails lightly. After all, we know another character from our Duncan Egg readings who used the snail as his piece, as the sigil was Uthor Underleaf. And he was using that as a means of hiding in plain sight, of making people think he's slow and bad at jousting when really Uthor Underleaf is the finest Tory knight you shall ever know. Another friend of your childhood? No, a sellsword you would call him, but Westerosi born. Daenerys needs men worthy of her cause. Illyrio raised a hand. I know. Sellswords put gold before honor, you are thinking. This man Griff will sell me to my sister. Not so. I trust Griff as I would trust a brother. Another moral error. Then I shall do likewise. The Golden Company marches toward Volantis as we speak, there to await the coming of our queen out of the east. Beneath the gold, the bitter steel. I had heard the Golden Company was under contract with one of the free cities. Mere, Illyrio smirked. Contracts can be broken. There is more coin and cheese than I knew, said Tyrion. But how did you accomplish that? The Magister waggled his fat fingers. Some contracts are written ink and some in blood. I say no more. And that right there, that line, written ink and some in blood. The Golden Company, since their inception, since the founding by Bittersteel, have always been Blackfyre supporters. Now, Illyrio, in the paragraphs that are upcoming, is going to try and wave that away. The whole red or black a dragon is still a dragon thing. Like, they're gonna join cause with Dany because Dany's gonna lead them home. The sellswords are going home. But the thing is that we know from Dany that the Golden Company had an opportunity to do that because Viserys had tried to hire them. And the line is that they heard him out. They ate his food and drank his wine, and they laughed at him. If the goal for the Golden Company was to go home under a dragon, whether it be black or red, Targaryen or Blackfyre, then they had an opportunity with Viserys, and they did not take it. Now, we can look at that and say, well, yeah, Viserys is terrible. The Golden Company made a good decision not aligning with him. But still, it was an opportunity. While Viserys may suck, the Golden Company could still have made use of him, at least insofar as returning to Westeros. But they don't. Instead, they hook their cause to this kid, Fagon, who will pop up in this book. And that is a line. Like, some contracts are written ink and some in blood. Well, if the Golden Company is renowned for never breaking contracts, yet here they have. First time in near 100-year history that they have broken a contract. And they're doing so for this kid who seemingly comes out of nowhere. Then that must mean that the thing linking them to him must be deeper. The bond has to be more than just words written on a piece of paper. Instead, it would have to be a blood tie. Contract written blood. That just means, like, for me, at least for me, in my opinion, the idea that Aegon is actually a Targaryen and not a Blackfyre, despite all the Blackfyre imagery, and having the Golden Company, having near century-long Blackfyre supporters who have already passed up their chance to go with a with a red dragon, but instead siding with this one, must mean that that dragon is black. That it is a black dragon. And then we also get, of course, all the other Blackfyre imagery that crops up in other chapters. Brienne and Podrick Payne's travels with the clanging dragon. And when they meet Septon Maribald, who is a veteran of the War of the Nine Penny Kings, which is also the 5th Blackfyre rebellion. And of course, I already brought up the the scrap Tyrion chapter from Feast, those 6 pages history lesson, which talks even more about the War of the Nine Penny Kings and about Meleys the Monstrous. Like, why is it that Holden Halfhand is focusing on a Blackfyre rebellion in this history lesson? That is why we definitely got to read those 6 pages. But another day. We'll definitely do it. The dwarf pondered that. The Golden Company was reputedly the finest of the free companies, founded a century ago by Bittersteel, a bastard son of Aegon the Unworthy. When another of Aegon's great bastards tried to seize the Iron Throne from his trueborn half-brother, Bittersteel joined the revolt. Daemon Blackfyre had perished on the red grass field, however, and his rebellion with him. Those followers of the Black Dragons who survived the battle yet refused to bend the knee and fled across the narrow sea. Among them, Daemon's younger sons, Bittersteel, and hundreds of landless lords and knights who soon found themselves forced to sell their swords to eat. Some joined the Ragged Standard, some the Second Sons or Maiden's Men. Bittersteel saw the strength of House Blackfyre scattering to the 4 winds, so he formed the Golden Company to bind the exiles together. From that day to this, the men of the Golden Company had lived and died in the disputed lands, fighting for Myr or Lys or Tyrosh in their pointless little wars, and dreaming of the land their fathers had lost. They were exiles and sons of exiles, dispossessed and unforgiven, yet formidable fighters still. Yep, and so Bittersteel is Bittersteel, best bros, Bittersteel. Best bros, King Daemon, Blackfyre, Bittersteel. Yep. Yeah, because Bittersteel is definitely Daemon's most ardent supporter. And that would work good in Daemon's favor. And I've pondered that Daemon probably also tried to bring Bloodraven in on it. As many brothers as possible would really help him. But it seems like Bloodraven chose to stick to Daeron the Good and fight for the Trueborn, if we accept that. I still very much love the idea of Daeron the Good actually being a bastard son of Aemon the Dragon Knight, because it means that the Blackfyre rebellions are not the bastard pretender claimant trying to overthrow his trueborn brother, but rather a war between 2 bastards. That would be the irony that George loves. It's palpable. But again, even the founding of the Golden Company by Bittersteel is a means of keeping the Blackfyre supporters together under one roof before he loses too many of them out in Essos with these other free companies. Bittersteel, for his history, he does take up employ with the Second Sons, and he does that as a means of putting bread on the table. Obviously, the man's in exile. He has to feed himself. But he uses his time as a sellsword with this free company to learn the inner workings, to learn the tricks of the trade. And so when he is ready, he founded his own company and then brought as many of the people who came over with him as a means of keeping them all together. Keep everyone under one roof. Our time will come again. And that is the attempts that we see then with the Blackfyre rebellions that come after, with Daemon's younger sons, and then his grandsons, and then so on until we get to Meleys the Monstrous. And that's when it seems like the Blackfyre thing just ends, killed in the Stepstones, until we get here with the more tidbits of information that Illyrio is going to drop, because Illyrio talks too much. Even though he says, I say no more, he will say more. I admire your powers of persuasion, Tyrion told Illyrio. How did you convince the Golden Company to take up the cause of our sweet queen when they have spent so much of their history fighting against the Targaryens? Illyrio brushed the objection as if it were a fly. Black or red, a dragon is still a dragon. When Meleys the monstrous died upon the stepstones, it was the end of the male line of House Blackfyre. The cheesemonger smiled through his forked beard. And Daenerys will give the exiles what Bittersteel and the Blackfyres never could. She will take them home. With fire and sword. It was the kind of homecoming that Tyrion wished for as well. 10,000 swords make for a princely gift, I grant you. Her grace should be most pleased. The Magister gave a modest bob of his head, chins jiggling. I would never presume to say what might please her grace. Prudent of you. Tyrion knew much and more about the gratitude of kings. Why should queens be any different? Okay, so that is another, again, it seems like a small line, but it's really a big one. Why would you specify that the male line died out? If the Blackfyres are gone, then that would be what you say. Well, the Blackfyres are all dead. But no, he says that the male line dies out, which means that which gives the impression that the Blackfyre line could still continue through the female side. Now we know that Daemon Blackfyre had at least one daughter. He has 7 sons, a daughter named Dalla, and possibly a second unnamed daughter. In fact, of the 7 sons that Daemon Blackfyre had, only 5 of them are named. So George actually has a lot of wiggle room with more Blackfyres, because he still has 2, possibly 3 Blackfyres from the man himself to work with that he has given no information on. And Dalla was married to Bittersteel. So not only do we have like Blackfyres through Daemon Blackfyre himself, but there's always the chance that Bittersteel may have had his own children with Dalla, which becomes a second branch of the Blackfyre line. And then there's also, you can couple that with Bright Flame theory. A lot of people like to bring that in. Aerion Brightflame, the sadistic older brother of Egg, is when he is exiled in Lys for a few years. George has said he fathers bastard in Lys when he takes up service with the Second Sons. Aerion Brightflame fights for one of these free companies in his time out in Lys and fathers bastards. So more dragon seeds running around in Essos through Blackfyre line and through Brightflame line, and there's the possibility that they might have come together. That's theory. There's nothing concrete to point at, but it is this whole swath of unwritten history that we don't have. A lot of these blanks that George needs to fill in. Should we ever get a Fire and Blood Part 2 or more Duncan Egg Tales? Just a lot of room to work with. A lot of room to work with. But anyway, so then the question becomes like, okay, well, if the Blackfyres continue on through the female line, what happens to them? If we're going on this theory of Fagon being a Blackfyre, that his mother was a Blackfyre, and that Illyrio is a potential father, then the question then becomes, well, how do the Blackfyres end up in pillow houses in Lys? And this could apply too to Varys, if Varys is actually a secret Blackfyre. It is a point to mention that Varys, we don't know what Varys' hair color is, and I believe we never really get a clear vision of what eye color he has. Is Varys naturally bald, or is he shaving his head like Egg? If Varys can grow hair out, if he were to let it go, would it be silver or platinum blonde? Is he hiding Blackfyre? Is he hiding Targaryen Blackfyre features the way Egg is, shaving his head in the Duncan Egg novels? We don't know. Unknown unknowns. We can speculate, but George is definitely leaving us some crumbs that point us towards these directions. So this is a tinfoil theory of mine, and it stems from the War of the Nine Penny Kings. Okay, how do the Blackfyres, after the death of Meleys the Monstrous, how do the remaining Blackfyre women, what happens to them? And one idea that I have is in the aftermath of the War of the Nine Penny Kings. So we're going to get another quick history lesson here. So the War of the Nine Penny Kings is a war launched by what was known as the Band of Nine. These pirates, merchant princes, sellswords, exiles, they meet under what is known as the Tree of Crowns in the Disputed Lands. And they make this fraternal pact that they will have each other's backs and that each member will work towards furthering the goals of the other ones. And it's very reminiscent of the Peach Garden Oath from Romance of the Three Kingdoms. But unlike the characters in Romance, unlike Liu Bei, Guan Yu, and Zhang Fei, forgive me if I might have butchered the Chinese pronunciation, unlike those guys who actually are committed to one another in seeing their goals through, the Band of Nine, they're all crooks, right? And the idea to me, right, again, personal opinion, the idea to me of honor among thieves is bullshit, right? Just my personal feeling. When I look at the Band of Nine, I do not see 9 sworn brothers and sisters all in this together. I see 9 people all ready to stab the other 8 in the back the moment it suits them. This is not an alliance to put much faith in. And of the Band of Nine, Meleys the Monstrous by far has the loftiest of goals: to take the entirety of Westeros, to take the Iron Throne. How does Meleys garner the support of the Band of Nine for such an endeavor? Well, we get the idea. We can get a smidgen of that through what Illyrio had said about Viserys. Viserys had said that he would have made Illyrio his master of coin and given him his castle of choice. Viserys is essentially writing checks that his ass can't cash, making promises of, when I come into my throne, you'll get this. When I come into my throne, you'll get that. That is offering Daenerys, in this sense, is how he buys Khal Drogo's support. So Meleys was probably doing the same thing with the Band of Nine. When I get the throne, you'll get this. When I get the throne, you'll get that. And that is how the Band of Nine starts. They start by conquering the Disputed Lands. Later, they move on to Tyrosh. They secure that for another member of the Band of Nine, Aliklo. And then they move to the Stepstones. And that is when Westeros looks over. Egg, for his part, had thought that the Band of Nine would have been stamped out in somewhere in Essos. He didn't imagine that it would get to the Stepstones. By this point, though, Egg is dead. His son Jaehaerys has taken the throne as Jaehaerys II. He is a young king, new king, very weak and sickly. And so the Band of Nine is able to look from their place in the Stepstones that they've now recently conquered. And this seems like a good launching off point. New king, weak king, in their minds, weak king. But what they don't realize is that Jaehaerys, despite being very sickly, he had a sharp mind. And while he was not able to personally lead the armies of Westeros the way he wanted to, he was able to make war plans from his sickbed. And he had very capable men to help, and possibly women, but very capable people, very capable people of helping him carry out these war plans. And they take the war to the Stepstones. This isn't going to be a repeat of the 3rd or 4th Blackfyre Rebellion. We are not even going to let them make landing here in Westeros. We are taking the fight to them. And that is the War of the Nine Penny Kings. And the War of the Nine Penny Kings, it is a maker for a lot of the big power players that we know of, because it is through the War of the Nine Penny Kings that we get Steffon Baratheon, Robert Baratheon's father, he steps up. This is where Tywin Lannister earns his spurs. Aerys the Mad King is knighted during the War of the Nine Penny Kings. Hoster Tully fights in there. There he becomes acquainted with Lord Baelish. This Lord Baelish is the father of this Lord Baelish. We don't know his name, but he's the father of Peter Baelish. He performs some service for Hoster Tully during the war, and Hoster Tully, as reward, will take Peter Baelish as his ward and foster him. This is where Jon Arryn becomes acquainted with Rickard Stark and Steffon Baratheon, and he will then take their sons, Robert and Ned, as wards. So a lot of this Southran ambitions that we know, this coming together of the great lords of all the major houses, the War of the Nine Penny Kings is one of the things that really set that into motion. And then, of course, Barristan will make another big name for himself when he slays Meleys. So what happens then in the aftermath to the remaining Blackfyres? Well, if Meleys the Monstrous had been making all of these promises to get the support from the Band of Nine, and then he dies, well, then he has a lot of unpaid favors, checks that he could not, writing checks he couldn't cash. So what happens to the Blackfyre women? Well, when you're in the company of thieves and sellswords and crooks, well, chances are what I can see happening is these women, these sisters, nieces, daughters, what have you of Meleys, they're probably taken in by the Band of Nine and sold into slavery. It's worth noting that another member of this Band of Nine is a relative, an ancestor of Salladhor Saan, so a Lyseni. So if the question then becomes, how do Blackfyre women, Blackfyre princesses, we can say, end up in Lyseni pillow houses? Then it's probably them being sold into sexual slavery by the 8 remaining crooks, or whatever survivors you have of the Band of the Nine, cashing in what they can from Meleys after he's dead. That is the theory that I've crafted of how Sarah, if Sarah, Illyrio's wife, Illyrio's second wife, is a Blackfyre, how she ends up in a Lyseni pillow house probably stems from the aftermath of the War of the Nine Penny Kings. And we have precedent for that with another Targaryen named Sarah, that is the daughter of Jaehaerys the Conciliator. The name scheme is just one letter off. Sarah, the daughter of Jaehaerys, is spelled Seara. Sarah, the wife of Illyrio, is spelled Serra. So it's just a one-letter difference. But again, just as Illyrio, as the master of coin, has precedent through the Rhaego Dross story, the Pentoshi master of coin of Jaehaerys the Conciliator, so too does the idea of a Targaryen / Blackfyre princess ending up in Lyseni pillow houses through Jaehaerys' daughter, Sarah Targaryen. So it's like, again, you just these breadcrumbs, trailing them back and forth. And this is like, again, that is why I said, like, the essay that I originally wrote before I started streaming, Fagon, a parallel of Kings, Princes, of Kings, Princes, and Pretenders, is trying to connect these dots that George has laid out for us. So that was a lot longer than what I wanted to meant it to be, but we'll probably hear more about. You'll hear me get to spill more of this Blackfyre stuff tomorrow with Dave in the Wins of Winter predictions chapter on where this possible Blackfyre storyline is going. But yeah, that is another Grey Waste Tim original theory of the paternity of Fagon, leading back to Blackfyres, this Lyseni pillow house worker that Illyrio takes to bride, being a Blackfyre. How does she get there? More than likely stems in the aftermath of the War of the Nine Penny Kings, when the Blackfyres are now, with the death of Meleys, when the Blackfyres are at their lowest possible rock bottom point. So we'll go back to the story. Soon enough, the Magister was fast asleep, leaving Tyrion to brood alone. He wondered what Barristan Selmy would think of riding into battle with the Golden Company. Okay, so this is another connection to Dany's betrayals and the idea of Barristan possibly being one of the betrayals if he catches wind of Fagon. If Barristan comes to hear that Rhaegar's son is still alive and decides that he wants to, Barristan, who had great respect for Rhaegar, if Barristan decides to turn cloak on Dany and march for Fagon, then that would mean, in a twist of, but if Fagon's actually a Blackfyre, then that would mean in an ironic twist that Barristan Selmy, the man who ended the 5th Blackfyre rebellion by killing Meleys on the Stepstones, would then unwittingly be propping up the 6th rebellion. And we already said, like, Barristan, like the line earlier about Barristan, like, Barristan's not cut out for these types of roles. So him blundering into a Blackfyre rebellion after ending the last one would be so Barry to do. So, yeah, we got to keep an eye on where Barristan's story goes in that respect. What happens if Barry gets word about Aegon Targaryen? Is he gonna stick with Dany, or is he going to try and join up with the son of the prince that he loved so much? All right, so soon enough, imagine. Barristan riding into battle with the Golden Company. During the War of the Ninepenny Kings, Selmy had cut a bloody path through their ranks to slay the last of the Blackfyre pretenders. Rebellion makes for queer bedfellows, and none more queer than this fat man and me. And of course, Barristan is in a means fighting his own rebellion when he arrests his Dar and is now acting as regent over Meereen while Dany is away. Rebellions and rebellions and rebellions. They're all over the place. The cheesemonger woke when they stopped to change the horses and sent for a fresh hamper. How far have we come? The dwarf asked him as they stuffed themselves with cold capon and a relish made of carrots, raisins, and bits of lime and orange. Citrus fruits always mean something bad, those deadly oranges. This is Andalos, my friend, the land your Andals came from. They took it from the hairy men who were here before them, cousins to the hairy men of Ib. The heart of Hugor's ancient realm lies north of us, but we are passing through its southern marches. In Pentos, these are called the Flatlands. Farther east stand the Velvet Hills, whence we are bound. So that's another bit of lore dump, especially the lines about the hairy men, the men of Ib, and the men of Ib, and that being a whole Lovecraft connection in and of itself. Yeah. Andalos. The faith taught that the seven themselves had once walked the hills of Andalos in human form. The father reached his hand into the heavens and pulled down 7 stars, Tyrion recited from memory, and one by one he set them on the brow of Hugor of the Hill to make a glowing crown. Oh, damn. Oh. Pulling stars down from the heavens. Well, if that ain't just some meteor talk, is it? And also, now this is setting up the story of the Faith of the Seven, which is definitely a Christianity stand-in. But pulling down the stars, that's like a line out of Revelations, the beast, the stars on his horns. George, this is tasty lore you have given us. So yeah, because normally when we think of the religions in A Song of Ice and Fire, The Faith of the Seven actually seems like kind of the weakest as far as something that has a guiding force on the world. Now, George has said we're never going to see literal gods on page, but we definitely feel a presence from R'hllor, from the old gods. The Seven, not so much. We get stories like in Fire and Blood, like the giant shadow that people say was the father, or not the father. I'm sorry, the warrior made on Earth. So we do get snippets. We get all of these stories and myths about the Seven, but the guiding hand, the hand coming through the ether and really putting a physical touch on the world to guide things, seems like it comes from the Seven the least. But even right here, though, despite the Seven seeming to be the ones with the least pull, I guess we could say, of these outer gods to make the to make the Lovecraft connection, even they have a moon meteor parallel pulling down stars from the heavens and arranging them to make their perfect idea of the world. But we know, again, tracing moon meteor theory, pulling stars down from the heavens usually has bad results. Crack in the sky and hand reach. Crack in the sky and hand reach. Yep, George is definitely also the music buff. We've talked about the Grateful Dead references. So him making a Bowie reference would not be out of line. Very, very possible. And the spiders from Mars. So Tyrion recited from memory, and one by one he set them on the brow of Hugor of the Hill to make a glowing crown. Magister Illyrio gave him a curious look. I did not dream my little friend was so devout. The dwarf shrugged. A relic of my boyhood. I knew I would not make a knight, so I decided to be High Septon. That crystal crown adds a foot to a man's height. I studied the holy books and prayed until I had scabs on both my knees. But my quest came to a tragic end. I reached that certain age and fell in love. A maiden. I know the way of that. Illyrio thrust his right hand up his left sleeve and drew out a silver locket. Oops. Oh, I lost my page. And drew out a silver locket. Inside was a painted likeness of a woman with big blue eyes and pale golden hair streaked by silver. Sarah. I found her in a Lysine pillow house and brought her home to warm my bed. But in the end, I wed her. Me, whose first wife had been a cousin of the Prince of Pentos. The palace gates were closed to me thereafter, but I did not care. The price was small enough for Sarah. And this right here is a red flag, right? Illyrio says that the palace gates were closed to him thereafter. And yet, in the first Tyrion chapter, Illyrio excuses himself by saying that he has business to attend to with the Prince of Pentos. Well, if you're closed off from the palace gates, how are you meeting with him? Now, it could be that they're not meeting at the Prince of Pentos' palace, that they could be meeting anywhere, but the implication seems to be that Illyrio is snubbed by the Prince of Pentos thereafter, and whatever princes follow in that manner. Or it could just be whatever new Prince of Pentos, because again, the Prince of Pentos changes with the seasons. As soon as a bad thing happens, they kill the Prince of Pentos and elect another guy. It's never stated if the princes of Pentos are all related to one another, or if they come from different families. It doesn't seem like it's an inherited lineage. But again, that's George being vague with who exactly the Prince of Pentos is. So could Tatters, the Tattered Prince, could he have been related to the man that they beheaded before they elected him prince and he decided to run? Or is he just from another, was he just from another high-ranking family that the people who run the show in Pentos felt also deserve the honor? But still, yeah, it just stands out of the palace gates are closed to Illyrio, yet Illyrio uses meeting the Prince of Pentos as an excuse to leave the manse, and that's when Tyrion is left alone to explore the manse all by himself. So it's like, was he meeting with the Prince of Pentos and other magisters, or was he meeting with someone else for other ulterior motives? We know that Illyrio crossed the Narrow Sea and met with Varys in Westeros. Could Varys have come over to meet with Illyrio? Is Varys crossing back and forth occasionally? We don't know. So, yeah, it was a small price for Sarah. How did she die? Tyrion knew that she was dead. No man spoke so fondly of a woman who had abandoned him. A Braavosi trading galley called at Pentos on her way back from the Jade Sea. The treasure carried cloves and saffron, jet and jade, scarlet, samite, green silk, and the Grey Death. So, yep, okay, so the Jade Sea and the things they're carrying, cloves and saffron, jet and jade. So the Jade Sea, the Cinnamon Straits, the Saffron Straits, these are all things coming out of a Shai. We're getting jet and jade, which is more gemstone, Great Empire of the Dawn imagery. Saffron, again, the Saffron Straits. All these spices, all the Silk Road imagery, but on sea, but all tracing back to Ashai, the Shadowlands, and the mysteries of the Far East. But what else is coming? Grey Death. Now, if you go back to, if you haven't watched, I would highly suggest watching my The Color Out of Ashai video, where I talked about the color out of space and the effect that has had on George's writing, especially when it comes to the world building of Ashai, the wasting disease from color out of space, the brittle death. Everything turns gray. It's all gray. Gray, 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 gray. The amount of times that the word gray is used in color out of space. If you were to make it a drinking game, you'd be dead. But here, coming out of this area, the Jade Sea, presumably the areas around of Ashai, out comes the Grey Death. The very same thing that strikes the Gardner farm in color out of space. I bet there were oranges on that ship. Maybe. Maybe. Oh, that's a good one. So the Grey Death. We slew her oarsmen as they came ashore and burned the ship at anchor, but the rats crept down the oars and paddled to the quay on cold stone feet. The plague took 2,000 before it ran its course. And of course, real world history too. Not only do we have this Grey Death from Color Out of Space, but we have the real world Black Plague, carried by the rats, specifically carried by the fleas that are feeding on the rats, even more specifically carried by a parasite living on the fleas, living on the side of rats, in a hole at the bottom of the sea. I keep her hands in my bedchamber. Her hands were so soft. Tyrion thought of Tysha. He glanced out at the fields where once the gods had walked. What sort of god makes rats and plagues and dwarfs? Another passage from the seven-pointed star came back to him. The maid brought him forth a girl as supple as a willow, with eyes like deep blue pools, and Hugor declared that he would have her for his bride. So the mother made her fertile, and the crone foretold that she would bear the king 44 mighty sons. The warrior gave strength to their arms, whilst the smith wrought for each a suit of iron plates. Your smith must have been Rhoynish, Illyrio quipped. The Andals learned the art of working iron from the Rhoynar who dwelt along the river. This is known. Not by our septons, Tyrion gestured at the fields. Who dwells in these flatlands of yours? Okay, so that's a bit of that would definitely be a bit of unspoken history right there. If the Andals learn their iron smelting and steel crafting from the Rhoynar. Yeah, because the coming of the Andals and the beating of the First Men, this iron weapons versus the bronze weapons of the First Men is, again, George playing with real world history. It's a likening back to the Bronze Age collapse. Just like he's working with the real world Black Death in this Gray Death that he's using. But also, the story that Illyrio is feeding to Tyrion about Sarah sounds just like the story that Tyrion just quoted from the 7-pointed star. A maid with supple as a willow with eyes like deep blue pools, and that sounds just like the description that we got of Sarah from that locket of his. And another thing to note too is that if Sarah dies of the Gray Death, which is a form of grayscale, grayscale normally starts in places like the hands and the feet. So Illyrio keeping Sarah's hands is also a little bit suspect, though that's not to say that that it could have. It also, Hold in Half Hand will also say later that grayscale can also start internally in the inside. Also, Shireen Baratheon, Stannis' daughter, her grayscale is more afflicted on her face. But the telling signs of grayscale that we know of through Jon Con and Tyrion later in the Rhoyne is that they're told, well, to check for grayscale, you're going to need to prick the ends of your fingers and toes because that's the most likely spot that it's going to start. But that doesn't necessarily mean that's always where it starts. If Sarah died of the Gray Death, then it could have been, and if it's allegorical to the Black Plague, then it could have been anywhere a rat or a flea from a rat had bit her that started the spread. I just did see I know people. I just reading in my research for these things, people questioning Illyrio's stories of how can he keep Sarah's hands if grayscale starts in the hands and feet, and the answer is that's not a complete 100% thing. It can start in other spots. That just seems to be the most common areas of affliction for it to begin. We see that with Jon Con, that it's his fingers that are turning to stone first. But it's not 100% of the time. So, who dwells in these flatlands of yours? Tillers and toilers, bounds of the land. There are orchards, farms, mines. I own some such myself, though I seldom visit them. Why should I spend my days out here with the myriad delights of Pentos close at hand? Myriad delights and huge thick walls. Tyrion swirled his wine in his cup. We have seen no town since Pentos. There are ruins. Illyrio waved a chicken leg toward the curtains. The horse lords come this way whenever some Khal takes it into his head to gaze upon the sea. The Dothraki are not fond of towns. You will know this even in Westeros. Fall upon one of these Khalazars and destroy it, and you may find that the Dothraki are not so quick to cross the Rhoyne. It is cheaper to buy off foes with food and gifts. So yeah, that's another thing too. So Illyrio essentially selling Dany to Khal Drogo, with, of course, with the blessing of Viserys, because Viserys will also gain something out of it. It's not just a part of Illyrio. It's not just somehow working its way into Illyrio and Varys's grand scheme of trying to create a Dothraki false flag invasion, which seems to be the grand plan, as it were. Have Viserys come over the sea with the Dothraki, and everyone's like, oh crap, it's the son of the Mad King with a foreign horde. But then only have that then be put down by the coming of Aegon and the Golden Company. And even though they're also coming from the east, at the very least, the Golden Company, as the sons and grandsons of former Westerosi, they wouldn't be seen as foreign as the Dothraki were. And they would not be seen as the son of the Mad King. He would be seen as the son of charming Crown Prince Rhaegar. That seems to me to be the big grand plan. That was it. Viserys and the Dothraki were a false flag operation to make Robert look bad, to cause as much destruction as they can. But the Dothraki in Westeros are sitting ducks. They are great at grasslands fighting, at plains fighting, at savanna fighting. The Dothraki don't know how to handle mountains and rivers and all these other things that Westeros is plagued with. In the show, they do a great job of illustrating this. One of the time when the show was still good, Robert has a conversation of Cersei of when Cersei says, well, what are the Dothraki going to do? And Robert's like, well, yeah, we could hole up in our castles. That would work well. But what's going to happen to the people? And the people are going to be the ones getting raped and pillaged and massacred. And they're going to see, while they see their lords and their king hiding away. So that seems to be the point. The Dothraki were pawns to come in, and then to make Robert look bad, do as much destruction as they can. But then Aegon comes in as this knight in shining armor, the grand superhero, the son of Rhaegar, does this mop-up operation to kill the Dothraki and Viserys, and then possibly the widow, if she's alive at this point still, the now widowed Daenerys Targaryen, then to be married to Aegon. The realm would see this as binding the two houses, healing the rift between the Mad King and his son, because Rhaegar was planning a coup at the tourney of Harrenhal, by wedding the son of Rhaegar to the daughter of the Mad King. That's how you close the loop and bring the Targaryens together. But more than likely, the truth is it's actually bringing back the Targaryens and the Blackfyres and weaving them back together and sealing that loop and bringing the Blackfyres back into the fold and making this no longer a main branch and a cadet branch, but one family, as it were. That is what I believe Varys and Illyrio's grand master plan was. The Dothraki were always a false flag. The real thing was for Aegon and the Golden Company to come in to drive out the foreign invaders that the weak Robert Baratheon could not take care of. And that is how the Targaryen dynasty comes back into being. But it's actually a black dragon, not a red dragon. Yeah, again, Dothraki is false flag is such big brain. I know. It's again 4D this game of 4D Savas. But what they were not planning on though was they weren't planning for these damn dragon eggs to hatch. Nobody knew that was going to happen. I really think Illyrio gave them to Dany as a wedding gift. She wasn't actually supposed to hatch those things. Now they had to work that into the plan. Because if Aegon is coming forward, what is his big claim going to be? Well, it's the sword Blackfyre seems to be the most likely thing. That's probably what's being carried on this mule and donkey wagon in these chests that they're bringing. Although, this is something I was discussing with Dave. Could Fagon get a dragon? Well, we have 3 dragons, but 4 potential riders. We have our confirmed rider in Dany, but then there's Jon, Euron, but also Fagon. So 3 dragons, 4 people. Fagon, if he doesn't get a dragon himself, he's definitely going to be set up to try and get one. And maybe for a time he can have one, and Euron then steals it or something. Or maybe Fagon is burned. Maybe Fagon will be a Silver Dennis, and that will be the thing that outs him as a fake, is his death. And again, if Fagon is eaten or killed or eaten by one of Dany's dragons, like similar in the way that Quentin was burned by Dany's dragons, then that becomes another Targaryen parallel, which is an inverse of Aegon II and Rhaenyra, when Rhaenyra is eaten by Aegon's dragon, Sunfire. Parallel of kings, princes, and pretenders. We'll talk more about that tomorrow with the TWOW Fagon JonCon predictions. In the end, Aegon was no true dragon. And for his part, Fagon, again, another connection. He has this moment. I'm blanking on the exact line, but it's very similar to a line that Daeron the First says right before he tries to conquer Dorne. Daeron, he is the son of Aegon III. So if we ever get a Fire and Blood Part 2, hopefully we get more of this. He is reminded by his high lords, like, hey, you guys couldn't conquer Dorne. Aegon the Conqueror couldn't take Dorne, and he had dragons. You're going to try and launch a war of Dornish conquest with no dragons, and Daeron drops this line of, you have a dragon, he stands before you. Fagon will say something very, very similar later on, after Tyrion convinces him to try and take Westeros on his own, rather than show up to Dany as some beggar. So, so again, more connections. Fagon is set up to be the next young dragon, like Daeron the First was. And it's probably going to end badly for him, the way that things ended badly for Daeron the First. So it is cheaper to buy off foes with food and gifts. And the other point I was making is that Illyrio selling Dany is also a way of saving his own ass, because not only is it working into his plans, but it's also a way of keeping the Dothraki from sacking Pentos. Buy them off. Give them a dragon queen. If only I had thought to bring a nice cheese to the battle on the Blackwater, I might still have all my nose. Lord Tywin had always held the free cities in contempt. They fight with coins instead of swords, he used to say. Gold has its uses, but wars are won with iron. Give gold to a foe, and he will just come back for more, my father always said. But now this is more the downsides of what Tywin is saying, like wars are won with swords. Not always. Money plays a huge factor, just as much as swords do, if not more. And we'll get that aspect of everything with the Iron Bank. The Iron Bank can make or break kings when it comes to who they decide to back. That is why we get the line, one way or another, the Iron Bank will have its due. And that is why Stannis Baratheon is trying his best to make nice with the Iron Bank. So, is this the self-same father that you murdered? Illyrio tossed his chicken bone from the litter. Sellswords will not stand against Dothraki screamers. That was proved at Qohor. Not even your brave Griff? Mocked Tyrion. Griff is different. He has a son he dotes on. Young Griff, the boy is called. There never was a nobler lad. The wine, the food, the sun, the sway of the litter, the buzzing of the flies, all conspired to make Tyrion sleepy. So he slept, woke, drank. Illyrio matched him cup for cup, and as the sky turned a dusky purple, the fat man began to snore. So again, more of this drinking and the purple imagery. What happens when you mix Shade of the Evening with Weirwood paste? Well, you get purple drank, and then you get gray wasted. But that's what Tyrion is being offered all this time. The strong purple wine from the arbor that he takes in the last chapter, the blackberry wine, which would presumably have a very purple hue to it, and now the dust drinking as the sky turns purple. It's all this blending of red and blue to make this purple coloring. Hey, girl. Cassie's on screen. All right. Yeah, so Tyrion is not drinking these bigger mind-altering substances like Shade of the Evening or eating weirwood paste. But he's getting symbolic substitutions for them in this grand bullshit detection that he is doing. That night, Tyrion Lannister dreamed of a battle that turned the hills of Westeros as red as blood. He was in the midst of it, dealing death with an axe as big as he was, fighting side by side with Barristan the Bold and Bittersteel as dragons wheeled across the sky above them. In the dream, he had two heads, both noseless. His father led the enemy, so he slew him once again. Then he killed his brother Jaime, hacking at his face until it was a red ruin, laughing every time he struck a blow. Only when the fight was finished did he realize that his second head was weeping. Okay. We got a lot to unpack right there. So he's fighting alongside Barristan the Bold and Bittersteel, and he has two heads. One is smaller. So we know that Bittersteel is the greatest of all Blackfyre supporters. I speculated on the possibility of Sir Barristan turning cloak on Dany to join Aegon. And then Tyrion, the two heads, one smaller, that is Meleys the Monstrous. And we've had all of this Nine Penny Kings discussion. Meleys the Monstrous had a second vestigial head. He absorbed his twin in the womb. That is why he's called a kinslayer at birth, because of that. And Tyrion is basically in this dream, this dragon dream, if you will, envisioning himself as Meleys the Monstrous, fighting alongside Barristan the Bold and Bittersteel. So more setups for this being Blackfyre support for Tyrion being for the moment being on Blackfyre side. And then he kills his brother Jaime. And we can think of this and equate it to Jon and Jon's dream, when Jon dreams of himself wearing the armor of ice and killing Robb and declaring himself the Lord of Winterfell, brother killing brother, which may be a dragon dream that Jon is having. So yeah, here too, it's like more of these hands that poke through the ether and guide the dreams of these characters. And that's another huge Lovecraft thing. Cthulhu's main big power is dream manipulation. And we'll get more of that too. And that becomes even more forefront when we get to chapters like the Forsaken. Aeron Damphair's Shade of the Evening trips. Well, that straight up is a Cthulhu cultist getting his dreams. Yes, I have two cats. I have David and Casilda, and I'm always looking to get more. I will adopt more pets eventually. But yeah. So Tyrion is having a similar dream of killing his brother in this armor, but he's doing it in the form of Meleys the monstrous, and Tyrion himself is viewed as a monster. Again, the great show line of Tyrion's trial: "I wish I was the monster you claim me to be." And in the book, he is, in his own way, becoming that, with the darker turn that Tyrion takes. That the showrunners did not have the balls to do, because they wanted to keep Tyrion likable, and instead made him stupid. I think Peter Dinklage, if he was given this material, would have done great with it. But they want to keep Tyrion likable. So only when the fight was finished did he realize his second head was weeping. You too, a crazy cat lady. Yes, I am a cat man. Cat man! But yes. So when he woke, his stunted legs were stiff as iron. Illyrio was eating olives. "Where are we?" Tyrion asked him. "We have not yet left the flatlands, my hasty friend. Soon our road shall pass into the Velvet Hills. There we begin our climb toward Groyan Dro upon the Little Rhoyne." Goyan, I don't know how to pronounce. Goyan Dro had been a Rhoynar city until the dragons of Valyria had reduced it to a smoldering desolation. "I am traveling through years as well as leagues," Tyrion reflected, "back through history to the days when dragons ruled the earth." So yeah, if given the Tyrion Targaryen stuff, if Tyrion isn't a Targaryen, he definitely is a stand-in for a dragon dreamer. Which, again, Chimera theory seems pretty good on there for why he could be having these types of things if he's not a full-on Targaryen. Tyrion slept and woke and slept again, and day and night seemed not to matter. The Velvet Hills proved a disappointment. "Half the whores in Lannisport have breasts bigger than these hills," he told Illyrio. "You ought to call them the Velvet Teats." They saw a circle of standing stones that Illyrio had claimed had been raised by giants, and later a deep lake. That might be a Stonehenge reference right there. The circle of standing stones raised by giants. Most likely is Stonehenge. "Here lived a den of robbers who preyed lived a den of robbers who preyed on all who passed this way," Illyrio said. "It is said they still dwell beneath the water. Those who fish the lake are pulled under and devoured." That's definitely some Squisher talk right there. The next evening, they came upon a huge Valyrian sphinx crouched beside the road. It had a dragon's body and a woman's face. "A dragon queen," said Tyrion. "A pleasant omen." "Her king is missing." Illyrio pointed out the smooth stone plinth on which the second sphinx once stood, now grown over with moss and flowering vines. "The horse lords built wooden wheels beneath him and dragged him back to Vaes Dothrak." That is an omen too, thought Tyrion, but not as hopeful. The night, drunker than usual, he broke into sudden song. Okay, so before we get to his song, so a sphinx, which has the body of a dragon, and one is dragged away by the Dothraki. Here, it's the king. The male sphinx is the one that was dragged away, and the queen is left behind. But if we take the inverse of that, we can see it as Dany being taken away, taken far east out to the Dothraki Sea by Khal Drogo. And that lines up this constant these inverses of male and female and one being swapped in for another is more of George weaving in the flux of dragons and of the Azor Ahai mythos of the prince that was promised. How in Valyrian, because it doesn't have a masculine or feminine pronoun, that the word could mean both prince or princess. Septon's Bard's writing on the nature of dragons, that dragons can change sex just like flame. And that being equating to real world animals like frogs and fish and certain reptiles who can change gender, change sex, depending on the needs of the population. So yeah, again, the queen is there, the king is gone, but the story that it tells is one of Daenerys and Khal Drogo, even though, but in that meshing, the genders are then swapped. It's fluid. Everything is fluid. Yeah, dragons are gender fluid confirmed. They might be. They possibly could be. If Septon Barth is right, and Septon Barth probably told more truths than anyone. He rode through the streets of the city, down from his hill. Oh, Tyrion's supposed to be singing. He rode through the streets of the city, down from his hill on high. O'er the winds and the steps and the cobbles, he rode to a woman's sigh. For she was his secret treasure, she was his shame and his bliss, and a chain and a keep are nothing compared to a woman's kiss. Those were all the words he knew, aside from the refrain. Hands of gold are always cold, but a woman's hands are warm. Shay's hands had beat at him as at the golden hands dug into her throat. He did not remember if they'd been warm or not. As the strength went out of her, her blows became moths fluttering about his face. Each time he gave the chain another twist, the golden hands dug deeper. A chain and a keeper nothing compared to a woman's kiss. Had he kissed her one last time after she was dead? He could not remember, though he still recalled the first time they had kissed, in his tent beside the green fork, how sweet her mouth had tasted. And so Illyrio's story about Sarah and keeping her hands is another means of Illyrio trying to find common ground with Tyrion. That this is an aspect they both share. The hands of a woman are warm. The hands of a woman who loves you. For Tyrion, it's Tysha, and something that he tricked himself into thinking that he had with Shay. And for Illyrio, that is with Sarah, who again, if this Blackfyre stuff is true, that Illyrio is still very much holding a candle for his dead wife in trying to see that, in trying to propel her family towards things. And then Varys can also play a part. If Varys, also being originally from Lys, the same spot there where Illyrio finds this Lyseni pillow house worker, if Varys is also a secret Blackfyre, one of the big prevailing theories I've heard is that possibly a brother of this Sarah, and that becomes the truth of how Varys and Illyrio meet, that it's more than just being friends, that they are also brother-in-law, good brother here, then that sends up even more of a connection. Because it's not just then Illyrio trying to see through the wishes of his wife, but also the wishes of his best friend's family, his brother's family, or his good brother, the brother that he chose family, in the way that like the brothers, the family we have, the family we're born with, and the family we choose. So, going back to the story. He remembered the first time with Tysha as well. She did not know how, no more than I did. We kept bumping our noses, but when I touched her tongue with mine, she trembled. Tyrion closed his eyes to bring her face to mind, but instead he saw his father, squatting on a privy with his bedrobe hiked up about his waist. Wherever whores go, Lord Tywin said, and the crossbow thrummed. The dwarf rolled over, pressing half a nose deep into the silken pillows. Sleep opened beneath him like a well, and he threw himself into it with a will and let the darkness eat him up. Oh, and that is The end of the chapter. Oh. Shit. I thought it kept going until they met up with Holden. I guess that's Tyrion. Okay, my bad. I'm getting my chapters mixed up because I could have sworn this is also the chapter where they finally meet the baggage train. All right, so, well, we're going to do Tyrion 3. We're definitely going to have to do Tyrion 3. Not today. That would be another 2-3 hours that we're going on. But yeah, consumed. He threw himself into it with a will and let the darkness eat him up. So yeah, more imagery of Tyrion going down a darker road. George did state that when he was talking about how much he likes Tyrion, he refers to Tyrion as a villain. Show watchers, if you were a show watcher only, then that never really dawned on you. Like, how's Tyrion a villain? I mean, yeah, he's snide and he does some shitty things every now and then, but he doesn't seem like a villain. And it's like, no, because that's not the real Tyrion. This is the real Tyrion. This depressed man who's being swallowed up by the darker thoughts, who right here, he tries to remember Tysha in a happy moment of their first time, and instead he is reminded of his father dead on the toilet. And if it weren't that thought that he has, then there's also just as big of a chance that the memory of Tysha, while he's trying to conjure up a good one, might end up leading him to think more about the mass gang rape of Tysha as ordered by Tywin, and Tyrion participating in it at the end. Tyrion is going down a very dark road. And Tyrion is not going to be the asset that Varys and Illyrio think he is, because when he does finally link up with Aegon, he undoes years of planning by telling Aegon to take Westeros himself. Don't go to Dany as a beggar, hat in hand. You need to have something to offer. And that is what is going to cause Aegon to literally flip the board, flip the table, flip the Savas board like a petulant child. Pick that up, dwarf. That is him. Illyrio, Varys, Littlefinger, Doran, all these guys playing this game of chess. What happens though if some kid or a dwarf comes around and just flips it? Hey, pick up your pieces. I hope you remembered what positions they were in, because they're all on the floor right now. That is exactly what Tyrion does. Yeah, and then Tyrion is a scumbag to Penny. That's because, that's also another thing. Tyrion's shallow. He very much is. Tyrion looks for love, and yet when Penny starts to develop feelings for him, he's like, "Yeah, no, you're a dwarf." And it's like, Jesus Christ, Tyrion, you're also like, yeah, Tyrion. Not only Tyrion's very shallow. That's why I made a comparison to Tyrion of like Tyrion's going down that like MRA road. Like, these are the thoughts that the thoughts he's having when he's referring to like every woman as a whore. It's like the thoughts that young men have that make them get red pilled or whatever the fuck whatever they tell themselves. Tyrion is going down that road, and Penny is another aspect of that because of how fucking shallow Tyrion actually is too. I want love, but only if it comes from a 10. even though I myself am a 4 at best. Which is a whole other incel pile of shit thing when you rank people in number terms like that. I make fun of incels too much, but they're incels, so. But yeah, that's Tyrion II. Spoiled ass rich boy. Yes, he is. Yes, he is. Tyrion sounds like his sister more and more. That too, yeah. Tyrion and Cersei are more alike. Tyrion's just a bit smarter, but he's also driven by his vendettas, in the same way that Cersei is. It's just Tyrion's more competent in seeing his vendettas through, I guess we could say, than Cersei is. Cersei's a mess. Cersei, and so that's again, like, if we think of Cersei as a Savas player, Cersei's just making moves without actually thinking. It's like she like in a chess game, she moves a piece over here, and then her opponent will be like, checkmate. In their mind, they'll just go, checkmate in 2 moves, because that was a really dumb fucking move that you just made. And she doesn't even know it. She's playing checkers when everyone else is playing chess. That's Cersei. And then Euron's just crafting a whole game of his own. He's like, you all don't know, you don't even know what game I'm playing, but you're all going to play too. But yeah, like, that's why in game terms, Tyrion flips the table with Aegon and throws a wrench into their plans, just completely undoes years of planning. And it's like you could see, like, you could imagine Tyrion just like turning his head, looking back at Varys and going, now what are you going to do? Which is spite. Spite can be a real motivator too. And Tyrion might but Tyrion's also having that, like, mindset of, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, you're cool, fuck you. And might just want to take everyone down with him. If I'm going to go out, you're all coming down with me. But that's where we got to have, that gives Tyrion, though, the room for character growth, which is to have his fall, but then to work his way back up in the way that other characters have had. Stannis works his way back up. Theon has to work his way back up. Tyrion has to work his way back up, but it's going to get darker before it gets better. And then I still hold out that Stannis might actually be a story of relapse, where, because that's another thing, if we're writing characters as people, then relapse is also just as likely as redemption. And there's also the chance that one person who's on the way to being better might end up going backwards and becoming shitty again. Because that's true. That's just true to life. And I see that with Stannis. That is when Stannis is not an iron rod. Like I said, he's actually very willing to make compromise and listen to other people. But the bending before he'll break before he bends thing, though, it could happen. I see that being the death of Shireen, is when Stannis snaps, and that's when he'll symbolically become the blue-eyed king with no shadow that Dany sees in her House of the Undying visions. Or I could be wrong. That's I'm just looking at things the way they go, but because stories of relapse aren't as common, because they're not happy, feel-good stories. But George isn't exactly writing a happy, feel-good story. He said himself the ending is going to be bittersweet. But, yep, so I'll take this as a last call for any questions. If anyone wants to Stannis. Yeah, I like people rag on me still for the Wojak video where I used crying Stannis, and it's like, I do like Stannis as a character. That's just a like, that was a joke. The Wojak videos are not to be taken too seriously. They're supposed to be more fun than anything. They're not my serious videos. And yeah, Stannis he is a blue-eyed king. He's literally a king with blue eyes. It's the no shadow part that's like the standout, and that's him because of the shadow, and that's a result of the shadow babies. We don't know like what happened, because Stannis was asleep when Renly is killed and when Courtney Penrose is killed. Stannis is asleep during both, but it'd be interesting if what happens during that is that Stannis' shadow disappears. Like if there was a candle a light lit in Stannis' bedchambers, would his body not be casting a shadow on the floor during the times that the shadows are out doing their assassinations? Like, is it literally my shadow shedding skin? Like, is it that? Don't know. But yeah, the king without a shadow aspect seems to definitely be symbolic of the shadow babies spawned by Stannis through Melisandre. You know, we did a lot more singing this chapter than I thought we were going to do with Tyrion's song and the My Name is Fagon rendition, but I'm for it. You're on his playing Cones of Dunshire. Oh, jeez. Peter Pan can't control you. Yep. All right. So, well, yeah. Again, I thought this chapter was longer. I thought the candied ginger thing came up in this, but my bad. I'm wrong. All right. Well, we're still going to do that chapter, but I think next week or whenever I stream again, we're going to be hopping back to the Dornish plot. David Lightbringer is going to come back to my channel for a chapter read where we will do the Queenmaker, which is Arianne's first POV, the follow-up to the Soiled Knight, which I read last time. And then after that, then we'll hop back to the Blackfyre plot with Tyrion, with the next Tyrion chapter. We'll do the John Con chapters eventually. I might also go back to the first Game of Thrones book when Arya is hiding amongst the dragon skulls and she hears Varys and Illyrio talking. We should start back and look back at that chapter, like knowing what we know now and looking back on that and really trying to get a grasp on like how much of this did George have planned. I definitely don't think he had the Blackfyre stuff fleshed out, but I do believe that even in Game of Thrones, he definitely knew eventually he was going to introduce some kind of pretender to the throne concept. Makes sense considering how much of Game of Thrones is derived from War of the Roses, having pretender princes like the real story of Perkin Warbeck and the Princes in the Tower. It definitely seemed like something that George was inevitably going to do, and then it just over time it fleshed itself out as the Blackfyres. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. There's also a queen. Check him out in Forsaken as well. 3 different women. Yeah. Yeah, the Blackfyres, they're very interesting for a time without drag, because they keep the story interesting, especially in a time without dragons. But so it becomes more of the symbolic dragons have to become even more of a stand-in when we don't have our literal dragons anymore. And it's, again, like you got to create more hurdles for the Targaryens to keep the grasp on power in a post-dragon world. And George definitely sets up a lot of them in that post-war period following the dance, the Lysine Spring, and whatever we get in Fire Blood Part 2. Just all we have right now are the tidbits that we get in the World of Ice and Fire and the Duncan Egg tales. But there's a lot of potential in that unwritten history. It's very much a blank slate for him to work with the second half of Aegon III's reign. His sons, his daughter, his children, his brother, and all of that, and all of the in between until we get to the Duncan Egg stories. Very, very blank slates. I hope he gets to write them one day, but needs to get Winds out first. And that is what we will be talking about tomorrow. Winds of Winter predictions regarding Fagon, John Con, Illyrio, the whole Winds of Winter Blackfyre predictions. That is what I will be back tomorrow with on David Lightbringer's YouTube channel. So check that out. Same normal time, 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. I'll be back with Dave, and I'll spit more Blackfyre knowledge that he knows that I love going hog wild with. But yeah, I need more black. Well, Aegor Bittersteel, come to David Lightbringer's channel tomorrow, and we will give you more Blackfyre content. But yeah, we need definitely more from the word, more content from the man himself, George. I do think that if we do get wins, another Dunk and Egg story would not be too far behind. I've said George is going to need that as a palate cleanser. And it's like he probably has the ideas of what he wants to do with Dunk and Egg next with the She-Wolves of Winterfell, and I've talked about like where I could think that story might go. All right, well, aside from that, then I guess we'll call it here. It was a good 2.5 hours. Yes, I will see you all next time, and yeah, come to David Lightbringer's YouTube. You don't understand the Blackfyres. Okay, you're going to have to be more specific on what you think it is I'm getting wrong. This is not the first time you've said that to me, and I'm very curious as to where we're coming from on what you think it is I'm missing. But agree to disagree on that one. All right, I'll end it here, and I will take the bait, talk for 10 minutes vaguely. I mean, if you want, I'm always down to talk Blackfyres. They don't burn. Yep. No, we'll just we'll leave it there. If anyone, look, you can always my Twitter link. There's a link to my Twitter also here. If you want to slide into my DMs and to tell me what it is you think I'm getting wrong, like those are open. They are a parallel. Yes, I know they are a parallel. They are a foil. Yes. I feel like I covered that pretty damn well. It's the whole black dragon, red dragon colors inverse. Like it's yeah, of course they're a parallel. And yeah, we're gonna end it there before things get heated. All right. I will see everyone next time. Good night.